putting in work. Work, yeah. Putting in work. I thank God for the favor when the money come. Half for the time, tax fees, insufficient funds. What I gotta do to get ahead? I'm on to something. What I gotta do to get a raise? They all be one putting in work.
At the Modest Sports Show, we believe in teamwork and not just on the field. That's why we're proud to partner with Lift Up the Vulnerable, an incredible organization protecting the world's most at-risk children in war-torn regions. Through your support, Lift Up the Vulnerable prevents human trafficking, offers life-saving education, and provides hope to vulnerable communities. Over 86% of every dollar they receive goes directly into their transformative work in Sudan and South Sudan. Make a difference today by becoming a monthly sponsor. Whether it's $10 or $500 a month, every dollar matters. And don't forget, follow Lift Up the Vulnerable on social media to see how your support is changing lives in real time. To learn more about the incredible work they're doing, contact Alex Hill at 205-515-6696 or visit liftupthevulnerable.org. Follow Lift Up the Vulnerable on social media and join the movement. Together, let's lift those up who need it most. Welcome to the Modest Sports Show, home of your college athlete, where we are player-led and player-focused. I'm Corey. I am your host. And guys, tonight, it is November the 20th right now, 10 p.m. You guys will for sure see this tomorrow morning, Thursday. We're back on schedule. We're back on track. Been working on some things as far as sponsorship deals and so forth and so on. So, just having a, wear different hats like I always say. But tonight, the structure for this episode is going to be college football playoff rankings. We just got the third reveal last night on Tuesday. It's Wednesday. We're reviewing it. And, man, it's like the football season is really just rolling along. So much is going on. So many teams are in and out, and one foot in and one toe in. And so the structure for this show tonight is really just, again, going down 1 through 12. We might even look at some teams right outside of the top 12 to discuss. But there are a lot of implications, just a lot of chaos going on right now in college football. So let's not waste any time. Let's just jump right into this. So we'll go in ascending order. At 12, we have Boise State. At 11, we have Tennessee. At 10, Georgia. At 9, Ole Miss. At 8, Miami. At 7, Alabama. At 6, Notre Dame. At 5, Indiana. At 4, Penn State. At 3, Texas. At 2, Ohio State. And at 1, Oregon. Now, last night was my first time actually being able to sit down and watch this reveal on ESPN, right, with Reese Davis and Booger and Greg McElroy. I really enjoyed listening to the jargon and the banter. I think that each analyst, especially Booger, I love to see Booger, and I forget the other guy's name. No disrespect to him. I love to see the animosity amongst them, like just the different talking heads coming with different points and just making their making their claims on what should be and what is. So I really I'm going to visit each team like we always do, make it short, brief, and I guess hopefully drop some gems. So Boise State, today I actually spoke with someone about Boise State. Now Boise State, 9-1 on the season at this point. I believe the Group of 5 level is going to be one of the harder divisions of football to make a claim to get into the college football playoff. Not necessarily the Group of 5 level as a whole, but just a couple of teams are going to make it very difficult. So I'm bringing up scenarios. If we look at Boise State has played Oregon. When it comes to Power 4, how do I want to say this? When it comes to Power 4 type teams, okay, because obviously Oregon is now in the Big Ten. Washington State and Oregon State are still technically in the Pac-12, right? But again, we don't really recognize that as a conference. So when it comes to Boise State, right, they've played 3 teams who have tradition in being a power school. So they played Oregon. They gave Oregon a run for their money, played them very good. They played Washington State. Next, they have Oregon State coming up. So those 3 games for Boise State, and it's just kind of really how you look at the two and how you go about determining what's valuable to their strength of schedule versus what's not. But Boise State technically has played 3 teams with a power conference name. And so them right now being at 9-1 is very interesting. And I say that because let's bring Army into the discussion. Let's bring Tulane into the discussion. I think those are really the only group of 5 schools for the most part. Or UNLV is in there at 24 also, but I think they're kind of out the conversation. But when we talk about Power 5 schools, if you look at Tulane lost the game to Oklahoma and Kansas State. Should they be penalized for those non-conference games? Right? And then they actually took both of those games. They actually played those power teams pretty well for a group of 5 school. To me, and obviously the playoff selection committee doesn't quite take that. They don't quite take Tulane, I'm not saying seriously, but clearly with them ranking them 20 in the top 25, they're kind of saying like, okay, we value Boise State's schedule. Like if we had to pick one, we're even picking Boise State over Army, who's undefeated. So with the group of 5 level, how they estimate strength of schedule, and I would be remiss if we didn't believe that what Ashton Genty is doing probably has some weighing in how the committee views Boise State as a whole. So Boise State is interesting to me. That group of 5, it's really 3 teams. Like we said, Tulane, Army, Boise State. I'm ready to see how that finishes out because, I got some people at Tulane, so I'm rooting for them. I always root for them. If you haven't, be sure to go check out those episodes with Landry Cannon at Tulane. Aside from that, I got some guys at Tulane and really hoping for them to win, but I don't think it would necessarily be fair to them to have Kansas State and Oklahoma count against them when Boise State or Army didn't have those same opponents. So just something to watch out for. But then you can counter that and say, well, if Tulane lost those 2 games to those Power 4 opponents, what would make us put them in the college football playoff? It's kind of like wasting the spot. So you can go a lot of ways with it. Tennessee at 11. I like this ranking for Tennessee only because you got to put them in there somewhere, right? They have a win over in Alabama. They have a loss to a Georgia, and they have a loss to a Arkansas. So, granted, their strength of schedule, it's been up there. I think where it gets very tricky in the SEC, even that mid-tier in the SEC, we've seen it. We've seen it this season. They have the ability to beat those higher-tier teams. If you look at Arkansas, if you look at Florida, if you look at South Carolina, those teams have shown you, even LSU for at times. If you look at the middle tier of this conference, the SEC that is, they can, if you take a team in the middle of the SEC, you can put them in just about any other conference. And yes, I'm SEC biased. And random thought is, when you look at who's won the most championships over the past decade or plus that, come on. How can you not be SEC biased? The SEC is the strongest conference. Period. And I actually cannot wait until the college football playoff. And if we get one of those Alabama's at a Penn State or Colorado at Alabama, you'll see. Then you'll see. And I'm not just Tennessee at this school, or like, we'll see then. And that's the beautiful thing about this 12 team. But Tennessee, or back to my point, the middle of the SEC is just so tumultuous that it makes it hard on those upper echelon teams. We've seen that this year. Georgia, okay, at 10. Let's move on. Georgia at 10. I lost to Bama, I lost to Ole Miss. Both on the road. Can't really blame Georgia. I know at times they look pretty pedestrian. We definitely understand that. But Georgia is still a good team when they're clicking, and that's like a lot of teams. That's like all these teams. I could say that about each one. When they're on, they're hot. When they're not, they're not. Tennessee or Georgia, they have the ability, and when Carson Beck and when his receivers are stepping up and making plays, and I'm actually liking now that the narrative is starting to change, because I was never a non-believer in Carson Beck. Ask anybody around me, they'll tell you that for me, it was never did he have the ability. It was always, it's like he got cold feet. It's a very big difference between not having the potential and just not being able to do it versus being able to do it and just not having the belief or the confidence in yourself. That when we talked about that time and time again on this show. That's a very big difference. Carson Beck has it. He's got it. He's got a big arm. He's got the accuracy. He's got the vision. I think he has what he needs to be a good quarterback. Is does he play to that level consistently? Does he play to that level consistently to actually produce what he needs to be producing? That's the thing. That's the biggest thing. That's my biggest thing with Georgia. Georgia's defense, they're going to play lights out. We know what we're going to get out of Jalen Walker, Dalen Everett, Malachi Starks. We know what we're going to get out of those guys, okay? It's that offense that is going to power Georgia and get them to where ultimately they want to go. Can the receivers make plays? Can the running backs get on par? This Georgia team is sneaky dangerous, especially because they're not at the top like they have been in seasons past. They're right there hovering at the bottom of this 12 team. No room for failure or error, because next week they have a Georgia Tech coming up. And we know what Georgia Tech has been doing all season. So definitely can't take that game lightly. Sitting at 9, Ole Miss. Now, Ole Miss, they're another one of those teams. When they're hot, they're hot. When they're not, they're not. But I will say, I think the biggest thing about this Ole Miss team is the defense. Their defense has stepped up tremendously, especially that front. I know in my last video on the second college football playoff reveal, I said Georgia's defense when referencing the Georgia and Ole Miss game. Truthfully, that was an error. What I meant is Ole Miss's defense. That front seven, that box, grinding, getting to it. The defensive front getting a good push. And they're really playing very firm. And so Ole Miss has a whole new element and dynamic as a football team. Something that we aren't quite accustomed to seeing. And so when you pair that with the explosive offense that they have, and they're on pace to getting a couple guys back like Trey Harris. I know Henry Parrish, he was kind of banged up over the past couple of seasons. I think he's been over the past couple of weeks. He's been banged up since the Kentucky game. And so, like, I don't know. Of course, they have my beloved Mississippi State Bulldogs coming up next week. But the way that this thing is looking with Ole Miss, they might get all the right pieces in place right in time. right in time. And not to mention they've had other guys step up in place of losing their wide receiver one in Trey Harris. So Ole Miss is definitely a team that I'm looking like, what could they do? Sitting at 8, Miami. Miami is one of those scary teams where I don't think it's going to last too much longer. I think Miami is going to run out of juice. I feel like the right defense, especially a defense who can create a lot of pressure. I understand Cam Moore has a lot of ability. He can move around the pocket. He can do a lot of good things throwing the football. But I feel like that right defensive front gets in front of that Miami team or that Miami offensive line and causes issue and causes chaos. It's going to be a long game for Miami. Their defense isn't really capable of stopping many people. We've seen that over the course of the season with Cal, with Louisville, with Duke, right? We've seen teams score and move the ball on that Miami's defense. But this, as the saying goes, your best defense is offense. So with Miami, we just gotta wait and see. Miami is just one of those teams where it's like, are they capable? I will say, unlike in years past, Miami is kind of restoring itself to prominence. But this Miami team is going to have to construct a defense that can actually complement its offense. I like Miami at 8. I'm not too mad about this. I understand strength of schedule. I've heard many people utter that. But I'll say that in the fashion in which a majority of the games they've won, I guess you could say it's made the ACC look a little bit tougher than what one might assume. Comeback wins, a couple hard-fought victories. I will say this Miami team has shown some resilience. I mean, it's all about how you take it. I know some will say, well, they should have never been down to a Cal or this school or that school. Fair enough. I could agree with that. But I think when the committee is looking at certain things, like I mentioned with Boise State might just be in contention, obviously because they're 9-1. But how much does Ashton Genty being on that team give them something, or give the committee something to give them a nod? Like, okay, it looks a little bit better. So this Miami team could be the same way, having Cam Moore, who is, I don't know if he's up for the Heisman right now, just given where they are as a team. And it's crazy we're even talking about Miami like this, given that they're 9-1. Yeah, their luck ran out. We might be able to say that about another team a couple spots up from them, but we'll get to them soon. Alabama, send that 7. Now, Alabama, I must say, this was hard for me. Alabama, okay, because obviously you're ranked above a team that beat you in Tennessee and Vanderbilt. Now Vanderbilt is not at all in the top 25. But as for Tennessee, that's kind of like, okay, we got the same record as a team that we beat, and they're 1, 2, 3, 4 spots ahead of us. So that is it. Some of these spots are tough. I'm a Alabama. I got a lot of respect for Alabama. I don't want to say I'm a fan. I have a lot of respect for Alabama. Do I think that's fair? I don't. Ole Miss obviously has a loss to LSU. And who was Ole Miss' second loss to? They have a loss to LSU and a loss to Ole Miss. I'm sorry, guys. Got to get that right. A loss to LSU. And Kentucky. Oh God. So there's really no implications in that spot with Ole Miss, But at the same time, it's just tough. These four SEC teams are tough, and that's Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, Ole Miss. Those are tough spots for the committee to be in. There's so many like matches. There's other things that you have to consider, even though, like we said, Alabama lost to Tennessee. But Tennessee lost to Arkansas. Tennessee they almost lost to a Florida team. Tennessee lost to a Georgia team. Alabama beat Georgia. So when you think about how things really shape out, the only reason I would say Alabama is sitting in that 7th spot is because of Georgia. The win against Georgia. That's the only way I could say definitively that's why it makes sense. So Alabama sitting at 7. Notre Dame at 6. This is another hard team because I spoke earlier with a certain somebody, and Notre Dame is really, all of these are head scratchers, guys. Notre Dame's one loss to NIU. Okay, but when we think about quality of schedule, their strength of schedule is very poor. Who have they beat? But at the same time, who have they played? Obviously, they're FBS independent school. Who have they played? You can't, and this is just one of those things, given the nature of the sport, you can't penalize a team for not playing nobodies. In the same breath, you cannot chastise or penalize a team for playing all the heavyweights. And that's why I'm actually glad that Florida is retaining Billy Napier. Just a tidbit on that. Aside from that, Notre Dame is a team that I feel has a very strong defense. I think their lack of offense is eventually going to come back and bite them. And I won't say lack of offense. I'll say their lack of passing game eventually is going to come back and hurt them. But Notre Dame sitting at 6. Indiana sitting at 5. Now, this is the one with all the mustard. Indiana at 5, 10-0. Okay? They're one of 2 teams in the top 12 that is undefeated. Right now, drop in the comments who you think the other undefeated team is. Indiana sitting at 10-0. Everybody complained about strength of schedule, but again, this is another case. You cannot decide, or you can't predicate how good a team is based on their strength of schedule definitively, I guess you could say. Because again, if Ohio State goes on the road and plays in Oregon and loses, but then at home beats, and I know this didn't happen. I know they went on the road to Penn State, but they play Penn State at home and win. You can't say like there is no in between. It just is what it is. It is what it is. We're looking at the team. We're looking at whatever the team put down on that Saturday, that's what we're looking at. Obviously, environments, conditions, so many things play a factor in the outcome of these games. But with Indiana, we can't necessarily say at this point, at the time of this recording, that Indiana is not a worthy football team because they haven't played anybody's. No, we have to wait until this weekend when they play Ohio State to then say, okay, just how good is this team? Do they have the ability? Do they have the potential? And I agree with the sentiment that if this weekend, even if they lose the game, it has to be a competitive game for it to, because if not, Indiana might just blow their playoff chances with one game. And I know that's crazy to say. But truthfully, there are some teams sitting right on the outside, like a SMU, like a BYU, who are itching, like a Texas A&M, like a Colorado. There are teams like an Army. There are teams who are itching, waiting for a game like this to go in their favor so they can slip through the back door. So this Indiana team has a lot to lose this weekend in the Big Ten going up against Ohio State. Moving on to 4. I agree with this sentiment also. Penn State. No quality wins, truthfully. I mean, you can say they had a resilient win in LA over USC. But their one loss coming to Ohio State, which is something that we've echoed. A lot of people have echoed. Penn State cannot win the big one. So with this Penn State team, with them sitting at 4, and with so much still going on in the LBC but with so much still going on in the Big Ten, it's kind of hard to say that Penn State should be sitting at 4 right now, because I believe on their schedule, Penn State has a Purdue left to play. A Minnesota and a Maryland. That's who Penn State has left to play. So if they win those games, then what? Do they stay at 4? Obviously not, right? Based on seeding, they're probably not even going to make a Big Ten championship game, which, when you think about it, a lot of this ambiguity is coming from not having divisions. Maybe we should bring back divisions, kind of calm some of this down. Nothing wrong with a conference game being played as a non-conference, or obviously scheduling cross-divisional matchups. But I don't know. I'm just saying, in the Big Ten, no divisions. SEC, no divisions. ACC, no divisions. And Big 12, no divisions. It's pandemonium. It is pure pandemonium. There's no order. We have to establish some kind of order to at least have an identify or a magnifying glass and say, okay, this happened, this makes sense. Right now, nothing makes sense. So, I don't know. We might have to bring back divisions. Penn State sitting at 4. Texas at 3. Another one. And it's like, when you think about it, when you go down this whole list of 12, and it's like, okay, that don't make sense. You got to put somebody in there. So we're going to have something to say about every team that's in here. But you got to put something in there, right? So aside from that, Texas sitting at 3. Texas, really no quality wins. Their loss coming to a quality opponent at home, kind of concerning, which I've said about Texas in the past is, or at least I've asked the question, how is Texas going to look against elite talent? Against an Oregon, if they, just speaking in terms of what could possibly happen if they play out of conference in the college football playoff. I think their big test is next week. Obviously, they have Auburn coming up this week. Next week, they have Texas A&M. It was funny to me, Mike Elko making a comment, or the reporter asking him, how are you keeping guys focused on Texas A&M? Or on Auburn with Texas A&M sitting in your rear view, or kind of sitting up ahead. And his answer was, we're not worried about Auburn, or we're not worried about Texas A&M. We're worried about Auburn. And he got it wrong. It was a whole big thing. If you seen it, it was funny. But this Texas team is gonna, this Texas team is gonna look their true test, and I think the only way they potentially clinch an SEC championship spot is by beating Texas A&M. And the way Texas A&M has looked these past few weeks, obviously a road loss to South Carolina doesn't look too well for them. I think Texas, even with a new quarterback in Marcellus Reed, They're one-dimensional. They're a one-dimensional offense, similar to a Notre Dame, a running quarterback, not really much explosive pass game. That always comes back and hurts you ultimately. So Texas A&M, Texas, a very big game. Of course, a lot of playoff implications. I think if Texas A&M beats Texas, they have no choice but to make a case to get back into the 12-team playoff. Right now, they're sitting at 15. So that's going to be great to watch. Cannot wait for next Saturday. So many big games. 3 at Texas, or Texas sitting at 3. Ohio State sitting at 2. Ohio State sitting at 2. I'm not mad at this. Ohio State has done everything they needed to do. Their one loss on the road to Oregon. 6 seconds, we know how it happened. Penn State went on the road, beat them. Ohio State, and then in other games, there have been times where they have looked pedestrian, like a Nebraska game. Ultimately, they won the game. That's all that matters. Ohio State is a great team, but who's going to be the one to knock them off? Who's going to be the one? Oregon, send that 1. Oregon, we know how Corey feels about Oregon. Oregon to me is the best team in college football. I don't think it's close. I pray I don't have to bite these words on January the 20th. I'm hoping that they come out victorious so we can continue to enhance the credibility of the Modest Sports Show, which I know we will because of amazing viewers like yourself. I love you so much, and I appreciate you for watching. But Oregon is, like I said, to me, undoubtedly the best team in college football. I don't believe that there's a defense well enough constructed to be able to cover them in the pass game, as well as get in the box and be able to stop their run. They have a dominant run. Interested to see how that'll fare and how that'll look against an elite defense, maybe like a Penn State. Maybe like an Ole Miss, maybe like a Georgia. But for the most part, I'm pretty convinced that Oregon is unstoppable as an offense. And I'm just waiting for them to prove me right. So, Oregon's sitting at 1. Now, there were some other things that I want to talk about and get into on tonight's segment. But I said I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait until some things play out, until I'm able to assess different perspectives. I'm talking every day. I got my feet on the ground. I'm talking to people. I'm just seeing what people think, seeing how you all feel about all the crazy stuff that's going on in college football. So tonight we'll wrap it up with that. Like I said, I appreciate you for watching and sticking around for the past half hour or so. If you haven't, be sure to like, comment, subscribe. Always keep the post notification bell on so you can stay track of when I drop like this, or when I drop a post, or when I drop a YouTube short. Make sure to turn all your post noties on. Go follow us on Instagram. You can find us on Twitter now, or X. I'm very bad about saying Twitter. X. You can find us on X. Have a new account. Be sure to go follow that at __ TMSS, the Modest Sports Show. What else am I missing? Of course, go add me on Facebook. Put a lot of things on Facebook daily at Corey Albert. Email us with any questions you might have at the Modest, or email us at the Modest Sports Show at gmail.com with any questions, comments, concerns that you might have. And for all my business owners, if you have a business, or if you know of a business and you would like to have it featured on the Modest Sports Show, like Lift Up the Vulnerable was at the beginning of this episode, be sure to email me at themodestsportshow at gmail.com so we can see about getting you on the show. Aside from that, guys, you all have a wonderful night, and I will see you on the next video. Peace.